I love
All
it.
right, welcome back to another episode of Path to Purpose. Today we have the founder of NADS as our guest. Dan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for having me, brother. It's cool to be here. I'm pumped to do this. Always
Yeah,
love chatting with more people fighting the good fight, doing for purpose things. So hats off to you for what you're working on, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
let's go. Let's dive right in. Thank you. All
Yeah.
right, so let's just what's the story behind NADS?
Yeah, great question. I typically tell this story in a very roundabout, long-winded way, and I'll try not to do that today. Long story short, I've sort of always had a background in athletic training, fitness, sports, growing up as a football player, lacrosse player. So training and athletics just had such a hold of my identity. And as I got older, it sort of progressed out of just fitness and athletic training into health. Specifically, there was one incident where I was 21 years old. And if you've seen any of the NADS ads and the founder story, you're probably already familiar with this. But basically, I had a weird accident in a very shallow pool where I hit my head in the bottom and I actually fractured my C4 vertebrae in my neck. And this resulted in just a world of inflammation in my back from my head all the way down into my rhomboids and then into my glutes, into my low back. Caused a bunch of overcompensation. I ended up having L4, L5 herniations in my low back because of it. And I was just living with this like world of discomfort. And at 21 to 23 in that window, when I was really dealing with those things, I just was kind of like fed up. I started experiencing symptoms like brain fog, chronic fatigue. I was dealing with crazy inflammation in my body. And I just didn't really think that was how a young man should be living. It just didn't feel very optimal. And I wasn't getting any answers from conventional medicine. All the doctors that I was seeing at the time just kept telling me that this was how it's going to be, and you're doing everything you can, and everything looks good in your blood work, and your X-rays came back fine. That small chip in your C4 vertebrae isn't anything that we would operate on. You're just going to have to live with this. It's like, okay, well, when I hear that from multiple doctors, it's hard to not have a defeatist mentality around it because it's now multiple voices of authority in the medical space telling me that this is just how it's going to be. I'm not really one to just roll over and accept something for the way it is. So obviously I needed to push back. And at 23, 2 years after the accident happened, I finally was like, okay, enough's enough. I need to get real answers. I'm not going to see a conventional medicine, or I'm not going to see a regular doctor anymore. Conventional medicine practitioners just aren't cutting it. So I found a functional medicine practitioner right around the time where some people were starting to look at that as a viable means of healthcare and actually taking your own health back into your own hands. So I met with the practitioner up in West Palm Beach, down here in South Florida, where I live. And that was one of the best things I've ever done because I got a full picture of what was going on underneath the surface. So, sure enough, I was dealing with inflammation from the injury. But what really was happening with all these other symptoms, the chronic fatigue, the brain fog, the irritability, the lack of energy, it was all tied to a hormonal imbalance that I was experiencing. And at 23, I had low testosterone. So that was an aha moment for me where I kind of thought, hey, I'm pretty young, I'm active, I'm doing seemingly the right things. Why do I have low testosterone, especially if I'm keeping myself in pretty good shape? Found out that this is actually a really common problem across men of all ages, but specifically young men, especially in America. And I started learning as much as I could about the root causes of low testosterone, what would contribute to that. And then from there, it just kind of became this optimization journey of trying to make changes in my life where I could to try and improve my hormonal health. Eventually, after switching things out like deodorant, soap, cosmetic products, food storage, obviously the nutritional change was kind of the first thing that happened. I started dialing in my sleep. I started to see some changes with my testosterone levels. It went from, like 350 up to high fours. And I started to really dial it in as I've kind of progressed since. And a couple of years back, I'm sitting in the sauna. I'm looking down at my compression shorts. I'm just thinking, hey, this is the part of the body here, your testicles, your gonads, that literally produce testosterone. And I'm sitting in the sauna in spandex, compressing that part of my body. I don't even know what the material spandex is made from, polyester, all these things. So I started doing research and I quickly found out that polyester is a petrochemical derived fabric, which is essentially just plastic turned into fabric. And it's very estrogenic. It contains BPA and a whole bunch of other chemicals and toxins that can lead to infertility, erectile dysfunction, and sure enough, decreased testosterone. So I just thought, hey, I got to make a change there too. I already did all these other things. Now let's swap out my underwear. Sure enough, I hit the internet and was like, okay, what is the best fabric for, non-toxic underwear for men? Found out that things like linen, hemp, wool, organic cotton are kind of like at the pinnacle of what you should be really wearing for a lack of toxin exposure. I just found that there weren't any good options out there for athletic training, and there weren't any companies out there that were actually talking about the issue at hand outside of the lens of sustainability. So I just knew from having a little bit of an entrepreneurial background with brand marketing, there was an opportunity in the market to come in and not only make a big impact on men across the world, but also solve a need that I had as a consumer myself. So I called my buddy, said, hey, I got an idea for this company, organic underwear for men. Not sure what we're going to call it. New interview out. He was a longtime best friend of mine from growing up, and he thought I was crazy, but he thought there was some merit to the issue. And I kind of just let the ball roll from there. And then a couple months later, we were in business. We called the company NADS. We make organic cotton underwear designed for healthier dads. Been doing it for about 2 years now, and that is kind of the crash course of how we got here.
Wow. So at that time, like, it sounded like you had like kind of lost faith in the medical system after hearing from multiple doctors that, okay, like this is kind of how it's going to be from now on. So
Yeah.
how did you talked a little bit about like not wanting to like accept that reality, but like what ultimately led you to like talk to like what was the word you used? A
Functional medicine practitioner?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember specifically I had, I think I missed an afternoon meeting because I just needed to take a nap. It was like 4 p.m. What am I, 75 years old? I need to take a nap. And that was kind of the breaking point for me. So I had been following a guy named Mark Hyman on Instagram for a little bit of time. And he kind of pioneered a lot of the functional medicine movement in the last decade. I actually just saw him speak this weekend. He's awesome. Thought leader in the space. Highly recommend following him if you don't. Really, really valuable information that you can learn from his page and from what he puts out there, just from an overall longevity and health of like optimization perspective. And one of the things that he mentioned was the field of functional medicine, because he is a practitioner himself and has a practice up in, I think in Boston. And I was like, okay, well, I live in Florida. I don't think that I'm going to go up to Boston for this. So at the time, one of my friends had told me that there was a practice down here in West Palm Beach, and there was a guy who was kind of looked at as a savant in this space. And his name is Joe Radich. He has a place called R3 Health in West Palm Beach. He's still my doctor today. He's absolutely incredible. And he really helped me get to the root cause of all these things. And so obviously testosterone and hormone optimization were at the crux of what I was dealing with. But at the same time, I also had nutrient imbalances as well. So in optimizing for hormonal balance, all these other things started to kind of work better as well. Yeah. But I never would have got there without the influence of some of these prominent players in the social media space specifically, which kind of brings me to a good point that, social media gets a bad rap for a lot of reasons, and sure, it's very addictive. And if you're just doom scrolling on things that really aren't adding value to your life, then it might be a little dangerous. Yeah. But if you're following people and accounts that really can provide value and change your life in the way that Mark Hyman's content did for me, like he was the catalyst to me even considering the world of functional medicine. And my entire life is drastically different in a quick 5-6 year period from one visit to a functional medicine practitioner where he said, hey, your cortisol is through the roof, your testosterone's in the basement, and you have some mineral deficiencies and nutrient deficiencies. I'm like, okay, well, I never would have got that in the last 5 doctor visits in the last 2 years. Yeah. So I jumped into that just kind of out of curiosity, and it was kind of just like the last straw for me. And I kind of had one of those thoughts where I was like, okay, well, what do I have to lose? A couple $100 to get blood work done. Let's do it. And everything to gain, right? So kind of reclaim my vitality at that point, which was good.
So you see Mark Hyman on social media, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to find someone who does this in my area. They get you in there, they do blood work, and they're like, okay, they see that your testosterone is low. They see that you have various different like deficiencies in minerals and vitamins. And then like, what's the next step? Is it like, okay, I need to, like, what were you eating at the time that was contributing to that, do you think?
Yeah, kind of a bro diet, just like bodybuilder, fitness, high protein, healthy foods that actually aren't healthy at all and just contribute to a whole bunch of digestive issues, right? So whole wheat bread, bunch of rice, bunch of grilled chicken, not really paying attention to things like nutrient quality, right? Like the actual nutrient profiles of these foods. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm getting enough carbs, fats, and protein, then I'm good. Well,
Yeah.
what about the nutrient profile of the food you're eating, right? Are you
Mm.
actually getting the right nutrients from what you're eating? If you're eating, a piece of steak from Publix that's grown with antibiotics and hormones and steroids, it's going to be a lot different than eating a piece of 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef.
Yeah.
So that was kind of that first lever that I pulled, was let me dial in the diet. So farmed fish, no more. Typical farm poultry, no more. Typical farm beef, no more. I made the switch to pretty much grass-fed beef, pastured poultry, pastured eggs, and then wild caught fish as like the main protein sources. And then from there, I started looking at more foods that had high toxic loads, specifically within produce. So obviously I made the switch right away, which is probably old news at this point. But if you are eating conventional produce, you should definitely switch to organic produce, so you're not consuming all the pesticides and insecticides that are sprayed on those fruits, which do have a long-term health detriment. So that was one of the changes early on as well. And then the carb sources that I was eating, I was eating a lot of whole grains, and might be pressing on a button for some folks out there, but whether or not grains are good for you is up in the air. Personally, I err on the side that they're probably not optimal for human consumption, especially in the high doses that we typically consume them in.
Yeah.
Specifically Americanized gluten, right? It's not ideal for digestion, right? There's a reason why so many people are pushing to gluten-free and gluten-sensitive and preferential around that. But ultimately, I kind of just dialed in my diet high level. I stopped over caffeinating. I dialed in my sleep. I started training less, but more intentionally. So I was definitely overtraining, 6, 7 days a week. Sometimes I'd hit it twice a day, and I'd go pretty hard. And it was just kind of my escape and my release at the time. And realistically, I wasn't recovering enough because, one, my sleep wasn't dialed in, and two, I wasn't prioritizing rest, wakeful rest as well. So when you're constantly doing that, your body's hitting that point of burnout. And that can actually have a negative impact on testosterone, which is contrary to what the whole point of exercise kind of is, which is to help you boost your testosterone as well. So it's pretty much diet, lifestyle, exercise, recovery, rest, sleep. Those are like the big four. And then I just kept testing blood. Every 6 months, I'd go back and I'd test my blood. And if there was, room for improvement, we would figure out ways to hypothesize what could facilitate that improvement. And then I would just go guinea pig on myself. Right. So one of the things that I'm proud of is that I don't typically blindly adapt anything. I didn't just jump on carnivore because, 10 guys on Instagram said carnivore was good. I didn't just jump on animal based because a couple of guys said, vegetables are bad for you. I just thought, hey, I've done a lot of things. Let me test out a bunch of things too. Because realistically, all these different diets out there, all these different lifestyle changes, while there's a lot of them and it can be overwhelming, there's only one way to really find out what works for you. And it's actually by testing it yourself, not just listening to the studies. Because, Jason, for you, your body could respond really, really well to high levels of spinach and maybe high levels of kale. And it can be totally different for me, right?
Yeah.
So everything's incredibly individualized, and I think that gets lost a lot. And I think people think that there's just like this one size fits all approach, and I don't think that really exists.
Yeah. Were you eating like a lot of processed food at that time?
Yeah, I was eating a handful of things that were marketed as healthy that realistically weren't, right? So a lot of different types of protein bars, protein cookies. If it had protein in the title, realistically, I was probably eating it. I was definitely eating too much protein. I was sitting at about 200 pounds, and I'm 5'10". 200 pounds was typically the weight that I hovered around throughout college, played college lacrosse and did that. And that was just like my functional weight, I thought. Flash forward to now, I'm 183 pounds, considerably leaner and considerably stronger than when I was 200 pounds. And I'm older too. And my testosterone's more than doubled. That's not supposed to happen as you get older, which means that what I was doing wasn't really working in my favor. But yeah, I was eating a decent amount of processed foods. I was eating out too much. I was eating at Chipotle a good amount of times. I was eating a lot of grains, pastas, tons of rice, Dave's Killer seeded bread. Like I was like, oh, that's a health food. No, it's not. A lot of these things that are marketed as okay for you when realistically they're just causing a bunch of digestive issues that will end up causing bloat and inflammation in the body and then cause you to retain more water and a host of other things. And then since then, the diet quickly shifted from healthy to just foods that come from the earth, pretty much.
Yeah.
Just like a paleo approach for the most part now.
Yeah. It seems like if you're not eating something that is like a whole food, you really need to like check the label and look at every single
Yeah,
thing that's in it. And
100%.
like,
Yeah, that's
and
spot on.
when we go to the grocery store now, it's like every single thing that we get, it's like, okay, like look at this, look at this, look at this. And like
You have to.
sometimes if we're out, and like for instance, like someone was visiting us from out of town, like we'll go to like Matt's El Rancho once in a while or something, and but I think like yes, I think it's so important to like eat healthy and uh, to like make good choices about our health and our lifestyle, but at the same time, I feel like it can also become neurotic for some people. I've seen that like
100%.
some people like, and even for me, like I've gotten to the point sometimes where like I've like obsessed over it to the point where like I wouldn't even go out to get food with like friends or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, I think also too, like to your point about the social media, like that can almost lead to that sometimes. Like if you have people telling you that like vegetables are bad for you, and then people are like, meat's bad for you, and to only eat vegan, then it's like, there's like, what do you even do if you're
Yeah, I mean,
listening to
there's
that?
definitely like an informational overload happening right now on social media. Uh, there's like a running joke that I've made a bunch of times before where it's like if you look up coffee and blindness, you'll probably
Yeah,
find research that ties coffee to being blind.
yeah,
And then if you look up coffee and improved eyesight, you will probably find research that supports coffee improving eyesight. Right.
yeah,
So you got to kind of just trust but verify, and also I think validate. Right. So I'm not saying drink enough coffee until you get blind. Um, but at the same time,
yeah,
everyone's incredibly different. So I'm a big proponent of getting baseline blood work done and then
yeah.
making some changes, at least knowing where you stand. And what's cool right now, tying back to what you said a minute ago, is looking at labels is with this issue in our nutritional food system that we have right now, it really allows for the opportunity for new brands to come in and make a difference. So the emergence of
Yeah,
a lot of these health first, for purpose, actually decent for you companies within the snacking space, although they're CPG brands and they're packaged and they've been processed, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've been added or they've been cut with, tons and tons of terrible chemicals
yeah,
and additives. Right. So there's a lot of good companies popping up that are working to kind of combat this issue, which is super cool to see as a consumer. Also, as an entrepreneur, I'm obviously looking at like opportunities all the time and just thinking, oh, like, where would that happen? Uh, but yeah, I think you can kind of go down a slippery slope when you start to have these things become rules as opposed to guidelines.
yeah,
And it's very easy, like you said, to become neurotic about it. It's damn near impossible to go out and eat perfectly all the time. It's
yeah,
2024. You can't avoid toxins everywhere you go. You can't eat perfectly everywhere you go. It's what quality of life would that provide? In my
yeah,
opinion, probably not a great one. You'd be very limited. So for me, it's 90%, 10% for the most part. A lot of people do 80,
yeah,
20, 70, 30. For me, it's 90, 10. I prefer eating at home. I can control my food source for the most part. When I'm here, I can control what oils are being put into the food. And I do okay in the kitchen, right? Like I can prepare a pretty
yeah.
good meal. So I've gotten more comfortable cooking. Some of my friends might be able to attest to this or disagree, but at the end of the day, I like what I cook, so I can just consistently do that, and I know that it fuels me better, and then I feel better and I perform better, and then the
Mhm.
people that our business serves, or the people that are on our team, or the people that I interact with, are all better off if I'm at my best.
Yeah,
So I think about it from that lens too. And then every once in a while, sure, like you bet your ass, I'm going out and having a glass of red wine and eating a whole pizza.
yeah,
Like, and I'm not going to bug out about them the next day. I'm not going to feel perfect the next day, but we also can't let feeling perfect be a prerequisite for success, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think you have a good point there with like the listening to your body. And like I think almost that should be the guideline of like why am I eating this? Am I eating this because I want to feel good, or am I eating this because like I just like I desire it and I can't help myself but resist, you know? And like it's fun to kick into that like once in a while, like, oh, I love like dark chocolate, or like for me, like I love coffee, even though it's like
yeah.
for me it's awful. It's like awful. But
Why
like
is that? Just too jittery?
for me it's just like my digestive system, it's just like clockwork. And to the point where it
Ah,
like speeds things up too quickly.
yeah, I
But
hear you.
But yeah, I think it's like listening to your body, you know, and like, yeah, not these things aren't rules. And it like the second it becomes like your ideology of like I'm doing this, it's like then you become like the guy who's like eating like fucking ground beef in the airport, you know?
I don't know what that's like. No, I'm just kidding. No. I have. All right. I've never had. Kate, I've never had ground beef in the airport. The one thing that I've been made fun of before was I went to Aruba a couple years ago, and there's like a couple things that I try to eat every single day, and I have probably for the last 5 years. And I believe in healthy fat consumption, and I think avocados are an absolute powerhouse superfood. So I brought 8 avocados through security to Aruba because I was concerned that the avocados they had in Aruba weren't going to be right. So I was like, I'm not taking the risk. I'm bringing avocados. They absolutely pulled them out of my bag during the security checkpoint. They're like, "Do you have avocados in there?" I was like, "Yeah, I have 8." They're like, Really?" I was like, "I'm not missing the nutrients from the avocados on this vacation. It's very important to me." And they like laughed, looked at them, put them back in my bag, and I went through. But even when I'm traveling, it's like, okay, when you're traveling through an airport, you're going to be drinking out of a plastic water bottle. When I'm at home, I'm drinking out of glass. When I'm traveling through an airport, I'm probably going to be snacking on like granola. I'll pretend I didn't see it. But yeah, exactly. You can't control it. You can't be perfect 24/7. And the stress that you'll probably cause yourself trying to be perfect 24/7 will probably be worse for you than the benefit of if you were perfect 24/7 anyway. Right? Stress is a killer at the end of the day. So,
I think that's I think what you're getting at too, it's not like there's like one size fits all. You know, like
yeah,
we all have different
exactly.
things. We all gotta listen to ourselves. And yeah, I think it's important to like listen to your body and listen to
Big time. If you notice you get inflamed after you eat, a sandwich, well, you might have a strong gluten sensitivity, right? If you have to take a nap after you eat a food, it's one of the key indicators that you probably shouldn't be eating that food,
yeah,
right? If you
and
get
it's like
crazy
if you're
tired.
eating like that every day, like how do you function? How do you do your work? How do you like show up and be a good boss or a good
Yeah.
husband or father if you're just like needing to take a nap after every time you eat?
People kind of take for granted or they just overlook it entirely, which is the impact of high energy state. And I don't think enough people have really tapped into high energy state to understand what it is and what you can accomplish when you're in it. Sure, for short bursts of time, but if you can sustain it, or if you can even do like, hey, I've got 3 hours of high energy state every single day, and you could do 1 year's worth of work with 3 hours
Yeah.
daily, you can literally set yourself up for life. Let alone if you can make yourself feel better most of the time. There's obviously always going to be days where you're tired and you need to take a nap and need to rest and unplug and mentally reset. But if you can maintain, for the most part, a high energy state consistently, you have an incredible leg up in society, whether you want to use that for business, for personal, for relationships, for whatever it is. There's only benefit that can come from it. And that starts with how we fuel our bodies and how we prioritize exercise and rest, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And yeah, I find too, like in the beginning of the day, like I like to use like that first like hour and a half before I eat, like fasted almost to like
Yeah.
have like an increased focus with like whatever. Usually I'll do like some sort of work, whether it's on the business or whatever like deep work, the deepest work I need to do for that day. I'll do like first and fasted.
Yeah. So, like, what is your morning routine typically like? How do you operate in the
Yeah.
mornings? Obviously, fasted, but
Yeah, usually like I'm not like I've had like strict routines, but typically I'll get up like 6:30 usually. Usually I'll get up 6:30 and just get up, drink some water and like read read a chapter of the Bible or something, sit and kind of like just hang out for like 10 minutes and just slow down, you know? And and then we'll stretch. Usually, if I did jujitsu the day before, not every day.
yep.
Sometimes I'll hop in the cold plunge,
Nice. You
and then
have
just
one there? Or do you,
there's one in the building here.
that's clutch.
Yeah, it is really
Love that.
clutch. And then usually just like get right into like whatever task that I have that's like the most that needs the most attention. So usually
Gotcha.
like right now it would be like right now it would be like, for instance, like reaching out, like doing cold outreach on like LinkedIn or something for my business, or
Yep.
like or or sometimes it would be like editing the clips of the podcast. Whatever's like takes the most attention, and usually like the thing I want to do the least.
You have to get it
That's
done in the morning.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
get
not
that.
that I like need to, but it's like I just like want to get it done, I don't otherwise it's like I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, 100%. When you have the ability to just go in, focus on something, you have to prioritize like those A, B, and C items on the list, because if you start with the
Yeah.
D and F, you may not get to A, B, and C.
Yeah. Or if I
Right.
start with the D and the F, like during the D and F, I'm thinking about A.
Right. Exactly. So like you're split mentally between the two anyway.
Yeah.
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 No, I operate
What about
similarly.
you? What's your morning routine like?
Yeah, so honestly, mornings have been something I kind of struggled with in the last year. I've been trying to cultivate more of a routine around the mornings, because historically, I used to be a 4:45 wake up kind of guy when we were first starting the business. It was like, okay, wake up 4:45, hit the gym, cold plunge sauna, train, be done exercising by 7:15, be at the coffee shop by 7:40, plugged in and ripping. And that was
Yeah.
really, really good for a while, but it was just for me not sustainable. I need more
Mm,
rest now. I've
yeah.
never personally committed so much mental capacity into something in my
Mm,
life until the
yeah.
last 2 years of building this business.
Yeah.
Um, and with that, I have a deliberate need to rest more than I have in the past.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out that balance right now of, how much sleep do I need to actually
Yeah.
function and have high energy state throughout the day
Hmm.
versus what's just sleeping in,
Yeah.
right? So finding that line right now is kind of a work in progress for me. I would say like a typical morning routine in a perfect world, if I'm nailing it, and I've been a little bit better about it lately, is I'm up between 6:30 and 7:15, somewhere in that window.
Yeah.
Uh, I wake up, I immediately go out to the patio and get my eyes on the horizon and try and get some sun in
Yeah.
my eyes, and that just kind of forces me awake. And then I'll
Yeah.
pop some shoes on. I'll grab my dog. We'll go out. I'll take him for a little bit of walk. I'll get some exercise, get some blood flow moving around. And I'll do a little bit of a
Yeah.
jog within that. And then I'll come back in and I am pretty much just going to like dial it in from there. And I'll jump in the
Mm,
shower and I'll do the first 45 seconds of my shower when the water's not yet warm. And it's like pretty
yeah.
cold. It's probably 50 degrees, 45
Yeah.
degrees. And I just
Mm,
get in. The moment I turn it on, I'm getting over that mental wall and I'm just getting into the cold water.
yeah.
And I don't do cold plunge anymore per se in tubs and doing actual plunges, but like this for me, the mental benefit for me has always been better than the physiological benefit for me. So I get
Yeah.
that aspect in here, and staying in there for 45 seconds is just that first big win of the day.
Yeah.
And then I'm ready to rip and I just jump into work.
Yeah.
I don't have a journaling practice in the morning. I don't have a meditation practice in the morning. I don't make some fancy coffee cocktail. Sometimes I go to coffee shops. Sometimes I stay at home. If I have calls in the morning, I'm staying at home and I'm taking them from here. If
Mm,
I am fortunate enough to not have calls in the morning, which I'm trying to spend less time on calls as we push into
yeah.
2025 next year, uh, I will go to a coffee shop. I'll get a cappuccino and I'll just get into the work. And
Yeah.
there's just always things to be done. And at the end of the day, if there aren't things to be done, it's my job to think of where the room for improvement is within the
Mm,
operation, within the business, the digital side, the people side, the team.
yeah.
And I just can constantly keep coming up with more things that the business can do to improve and get better. And
Hmm.
in turn, to get more underwear on more guys across the country and hopefully across the
Yeah.
world. And I'm just really all in on that mission right now. And I commit most of my mental focus to that. And I was just actually talking to one of my partners about an hour ago. And I said to him, I said, this level of mental share, like mind share that
Hmm.
this business takes for me is really great and effective right now,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be sustainable long term, I don't think.
Yeah.
So as we start to scale the business and bring in more people to do some of the responsibilities, I've been able to release a little bit of that mind share, right? So I don't have to do the
Hmm.
social media management anymore. I don't have to go and
Yeah.
make all the content anymore. I don't have to go and worry about what ads we're going to come up with because I have content members now. A lot of that's been super, super helpful. And
Mm,
I've always said the early stages of building a business are really, really demanding and really
yeah.
time consuming. And you should really try and leave it all on the table if you can and go all in. It definitely will lead to burnout, but if you can somehow find ways to have a little bit of balance within there,
Mhm.
you can pretty much set yourself up for the future and you'll learn so much in doing so,
Yeah.
to where that's kind of the focus now is like, hey, let's build this team out more within the business, because I've personally felt burnout. I felt what it's like to go really, really, really hard without coming up for air. And I don't recommend that. But anyway, this came from the question of how my mornings are. But I get into work, and then like at some point I'm going to eat, and I usually break my fast, I don't know, between like 11 and noon. And then I eat my food. Every once in a while, if I wake up and I'm hungry, I'll start with, something in the morning, and it might just be as simple as, a little bit of honey. This is a weird one I've been doing lately. It was like a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil and like a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, the fat, it just sustainable energy for me. It's better than going on an entirely empty stomach in the morning.
Yeah.
And I'm liking that lately. Yeah, long-winded answer, but
that's funny you say that. I had a friend visiting over the past weekend, and he like brought me as a gift. He brought me like olive oil, and he's like, I take this every single morning. Like you should.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Amazing. All right,
Yeah,
I'm glad I'm not alone.
Olive oil.
Yeah, it's the Italian roots. They're calling for it. Give me more extra virgin olive oil. Right.
Yeah. I've noticed too that about like having like a big robust routine and like working out, I find that like doing really strenuous exercise before like deep creative work I feel like it almost takes energy away. And it's like it's harder to have that level of like focus after like I've worked out that hard and had a big meal and like it's fine if I'm like doing something casual or if I'm meeting with somebody, but like I don't want to like for me I've noticed that like it doesn't work for me to start my day like that. It doesn't work for me to like get up early, go to jujitsu, like come back and eat breakfast because then after I'm like tired. Especially after like doing something as strenuous as that, it's like it's hard to like sit down and like really focus versus like getting up when you're sharp, you haven't had anything to eat, you can just sit down and really just like think clearly.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where you've probably tried both and you found that works really well for you. I like training when I have carbs in my system and when I'm high energy, and I'm probably highest energy around 3:30 p.m. So I typically try to get my lifting done then.
Yeah.
But what I am finding, and I'm thinking you might find the same thing, is that some moderate exercise in the morning just to get moving a little bit doesn't fully take me away from the high energy state of the morning that I'm going to tap into for work.
Yeah.
But it does get me moving enough and like start burning some calories and be a little bit active and into that metabolic state that maybe would not have happened if I had just gotten out of bed and just started working right away.
Yeah, I could definitely do a better job of that. I feel like sometimes just like being in an apartment and like also when it's dark in the morning, it's like I don't want to go for a walk on the street, you know.
Luckily that daylight savings now.
Yeah.
Daylight savings is like firing me up so much because I'm able to just pop up and be like, oh, it's light out, I'm going.
Yeah, it's definitely, but yeah, that part about the sun too, like I notice the difference when like I get up and like I look into the sun. I see the sun versus just like getting in and just working.
Have you heard of solar gazing?
Solar gaze, is that just like staring at this like the sunrise?
Yeah, pretty much. The concept is, you look at the sun as it's making its way up and as it's making its way down, sunrise and sunset, when the UV index isn't too high and it's not going to absolutely scorch your retinas. It's thought to be a source of energy, improve your eyesight, and have a host of other health benefits. Laird Hamilton, who is, I don't know how old Laird is right now. I don't know if he's 60 or if he's... Either way, Laird's older than us, and he looks incredible. And he's a big proponent of solar gazing. And he talks all about the whole benefits of... Yeah, right. And it's as simple as like, I just get out there, I stare at the sun, right? Me, the sun, I'm looking right at it until I'm going to cry. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's super good for setting your circadian rhythm, which is something that, a lot of the guys like Huberman talk about a lot too.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's get into that other part that you started to bring up. So you started talking about how as you're like growing the business, you can start to kind of like delegate some of the parts that lead to more burnout for you. For instance, like the content. So like what has that been like to the content creators? The content creators that I see that represent NADS it's a specific niche. So what has that been like? How do you choose them? What's your relationship with them like? Like what's that whole process like?
Yeah, so when we started, we didn't really have a concrete direction for what vertical market or audience we were going to kind of get into and, where our product would be receptive in the space, if at all. And we had some gut feelings. So we kind of just went off of those in the beginning and we just cast a big net. We slid into a lot of DMs on Instagram, and it was across the animal-based community, men and women. It was across the non-toxic living community, men and women, mostly women on that side. And it was across the kind of biohacker fitness community, both men and women on that side as well. And we were pretty much just shooting a message to anyone and everyone who we thought would be worth letting them know who we are and what we do. So we just did it that way in the beginning. And sure enough, if we sent out 100 messages, maybe like 7 or 8 people would respond to us. But what we had going for us was we were really the only ones doing it at the time. We were the only ones talking about it through the lens of health. And it was kind of a funny concept to be like, hey, we're a company called NADS and we make underwear designed to be better for balls. People are like, oh, that's interesting. Let me learn a little bit more about that. What do you mean better for balls? And then we just started setting up calls with folks. And then from there, the seeds kind of were planted and we just kind of kept going. And as we kind of nurture these relationships, those seeds kind of kept growing. And they would lead to other connections. And then, we got plugged into a company out in Austin who's an organ supplement company. And we went out and did a podcast with them because we just did a round of reach outs to influencers and creators. And sure enough, that led to that. And then we were on their podcast and then we had people reaching out to us. And then we kept reaching out. And, we're 2 years into the process now and we still do a ton of outreach. We're reaching out to creators and partners all the time, trying to get new people into the mix, trying to see if there's a mutual fit, some synergy between us and them. So we could obviously get more people into their content funnel, but also have them help us get more people into our product funnel. And it kind of just builds a nice synergistic relationship that way within itself as time goes on. But for the most part, like the demos that we serve are anyone who is looking to improve their health and wellness and is inclined to make a purchase and make an investment around that, whether it be through food, whether it be through lifestyle choices, and for our sake, obviously underwear choice. And then a lot of the people who are into this non-toxic movement like myself. And then there's people who are biohacking fitness kind of guys who it just makes sense for them to make the change. It's like, okay, well, if this is going to hold up as well as regular training underwear, then it's also going to be better for me. Why would I not make the change? It's kind of a no-brainer. And what we found actually over time was that all these different subsets of people that we kind of speak to, we have like an ad that we did, and it was a funny one. And it was, I scripted it way back when. I think we did this in May. And it was pretty much like, a lot of people keep telling us we need to identify and solidify our target customer and only speak to that person. So what that means is that all these e-com gurus are like, you need to go out and if you're talking to yogis, only talk to yogis and stop marketing to everybody else. I was like, okay, well, I appreciate your advice, but I'm probably going to just do what I want to do anyway, which is the whole reason we got into this business anyway, not to listen to people. And so I made an ad about it to kind of make fun of them. And it was like, people keep telling us to identify and solidify our target customer. Well, we've got guys like this, and I would like it cut over to a picture of one of our guys who's really into yoga, and like him doing yoga poses. So I was like, we got yogis. And then I was like, we've got ancestral wellness guys. And it was like one of our guys eating a bunch of meat and sauerkraut off of a wooden cutting board with no shoes and no shirt, obviously, right? And then I was like, we've got biohackers. And then it was like one of our dudes doing a bunch of CrossFit pull-ups, skipping and getting into a cold plunge. And then it was another one. It was like, we got guys like this. And it was just like one of our dudes out there jumping over a well, just doing a bunch of weird stuff. And then I was like, we even got this guy. And then it cuts to my partner, Steve, my co-founder, of him just running through the park with just his underwear on. It was just like to make fun of somebody, but it was to make fun of somebody internally, because if you make fun of somebody externally, it's not good. So we only make fun of ourselves. And pretty much what I realized in doing that ad was that the overlap between all of these different demos is quite literally me. Like I identify with all of those communities really hard. So like some days I'm biohacker, some days I'm very ancestral based, some days I'm definitely into yoga, and some days I'm just doing a bunch of weird stuff, right? And I was like, oh, that's kind of funny how that worked. And like same thing with my co-founder, Steve. We're both in a very similar boat with that. And it's kind of been nice because, what is the one thing that all of these groups of people have in common? It's just the theme of betterment. People want to just improve their lives. And whether it's, the water you're drinking, whether it's the beef you're eating, whether it's the underwear you're wearing, there's a lot of choices that we can make that actually do add up long term. And we're pumped about it from the lens of being able to bring cool non-toxic underwear to market and give men that choice. So that's kind of the long-winded answer for that one. The connections, without a doubt. Just the people that I've been able to meet and been able to have calls with and meet up with in person, customers, making an impact on people across the world, and even the small lens in which we're doing it now, and just feeling that the work we're actually doing does matter and we're pushing back against what we believe to be a pretty big issue in the world. That's definitely up there, but kind of just the people that we've been able to come into contact with in the last 2 years are some really, really, truly remarkable people. And I never thought I'd be even remotely close to them, let alone on a call with them. I mean, this is case in point. We're like, I don't know if we would have been connected at any point, and you're an awesome dude and I'm pumped to be here. And there's just a lot of things like this that happen. And then obviously the team we built at NADS, the people we work with directly, the people that we've just like come across paths with, and just kind of the whole flywheel of building new relationships. This thing has kind of been a really cool vehicle to just meet really, really great people. That's a great question. And we've been thinking a lot about that. So we don't have a desired outcome exclusively for this business and for what we're doing right now. Right now, the way that we summarize what our intentions with this business are is we just really want to make something incredible that everybody loves, right? And is it possible to get everybody to love something? I don't know, but we're going to do our absolute best in accomplishing that goal. And if we do that and we just kind of lead with integrity and honesty, and we're forthright in our approach, and we remain what I call ground and good with what we do, we really can't fail. So short answer to that question is, if we're involved with NADS in 10 years, that would be incredible. If we're not, and NADS goes into the hands of somebody or an organization with bigger, better resources to further make the impact that maybe we're not able to make as, young first-time founders, that would be great too. As long as the message and the mission of the business really aren't compromised, then it's a win-win for us. Yeah, and that's one of those things where I learned that the hard way of what happens when you really do attach to an outcome. Uh, Anything but that outcome will result in disappointment. So for this being, we talk about mind share. This business, NADS, as a brand, for me, as a lifestyle, it takes up about 90% of my mind share, which is a lot. It's obsession, hyperfixation, and a lot of it's really, really good. For sure. I absolutely love it. And I wouldn't change it, especially early days of brand building. It's kind of, it's one of those things where it's looked at as a necessity, and I feel that it is. But if I had one outcome here for something that's taking up so much mind share, the world and life is just so unpredictable that anything but that, I would automatically set myself up for failure. Because at the end of the day, if we sell the business, if we keep the business, if the business fails, if the landscape changes entirely and people just stop wearing underwear forever, if we just become a nudist colony, anything but that one lens is going to be looked at as not succeeding. So you automatically set yourself up for failure by only attaching yourself to one viable outcome, where if you do that, if you're so narrow focused on just one thing, you may overlook a lot of really, really great outcomes in trying to trudge forward towards that one outcome. And I think that's dangerous. And I think that as a young man a couple of years ago, I never would have been able to sit here and say that. And I probably would have given people the advice of not attaching yourself to the outcome. But I don't really think I'd understood what it meant or felt what it was like to actually embody that until recently. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I've definitely been working on trying to really live, because it's dangerous, right? If I said, hey, Jason, I want to sell this company for $500 million within 2 years, and anything less than that or anything different than that is a failure, I'd be like, man, you're probably in it for the wrong reasons, right? That's not the way we view it. At the end of the day, we want to make something really, really incredible. We want to make a household name, and we really want to shake up the underwear industry. We want to kind of set the bar for how underwear should be and untangle the wires for how crossed they are for how underwear is now. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think in trying to become a better operator within the e-com space, within the startup space, within leading a team, everything kind of follows flow. So I've kind of said this a lot where it's like I've leveled up in the last couple of years and I'm still learning how to walk in my new legs, right? And I've outgrown social circles and my interests and hobbies have entirely shifted and my mind share has entirely shifted. And in doing that, you just kind of look to optimize everywhere. So for me, it started with health. I don't think if I really set out to optimize my health to feel great and to feel optimal around the clock, or at least come close to it, I would have been in a mental spot to even think about starting my own thing. I don't think I would have gotten there. And then once I started my own thing and we had a little bit of traction and runway underneath us, the feeling of capability that comes with that is really surreal. And it's not that difficult to accomplish. It's very, very hard. You have to show up and do the unsexy work day in and day out for a very long period of time. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long. If you can do it for 18 months, 2 years, you can really set yourself up forever. I am a firm believer of that. I think that in that process of learning delayed gratification, of teaching myself and proving to myself that I really have what it takes to just be a disciplined person and really believe in a vision that I set for myself and for other people, you start to kind of hold yourself to a higher standard. And that then carries across everything, right? So I always talk about dominoes, right? And like back here, I don't know if you can see it, but I got the first ever prototype pair of NADS back there. And then I have a little domino, right? And it's literally a domino to signify that that was the first domino that fell to start me into this new life, right? So I have a stack of dominoes in my living room. And if someone ever asks me what they're about, I'll tell them that. I'll be like, dominoes are a signal for momentum. If you can have a domino fall, you can carry that momentum from one small choice, be it your underwear or changing your water or eating grass-fed beef or getting blood work done at a functional medicine practitioner. You can hopefully carry that momentum from there, that small choice, into many other choices. And then before you know it, you have this flywheel of a beautiful life, all stemming from that first domino falling in the beginning. And then all these other dominoes fall along the way. And then next thing you know, you flash forward and you're a couple years ahead and you're just like, wow, how did this all happen? It started with that one little choice, that first domino. So
Building this business over the past few years has really transformed who you are.
without a doubt, I would say it's probably been the most life-altering choice that I've ever made, for sure.
What do you think is like, in what way do you think that you've grown the most?
That's a great question. And I don't think anyone's ever actually asked me that. And I don't know if I've reflected on one singular answer to that. I would say in the last 2 years, my level of accountability and the amount of ownership I take in things, whether it be my health, my fitness, my lifestyle, my business, my friends, relationships, has gone from not great sort of victim mentality to just utter extreme ownership, right? And Jocko is a big proponent of this, right? Extreme ownership. And I didn't know what that meant until you have things to lose and you have people involved and there's something that is just bigger than me. I didn't have something else to really worry about, so I didn't. And then if I go out on a 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if I go out on a Friday night and have a handful of drinks and I'm hungover on a Saturday, I can stay in bed until noon and I can nurse that hangover and then be a lazy piece of crap for the rest of the day. And like, it was no skin off anyone's back. If I were to go and do that now, it's not like it's bigger than me now, right? So I have a team, I have customers, I have a business that runs on social media 24/7 around the clock, to where I don't believe that I can take that, nor do I want to by any means slow my mindset down like that by drinking and running from my problems the way I used to. But I just take ownership differently than I used to. And ultimately, I don't make the same choices that I used to because I now know that there really aren't short-term choices. Everything plays a role in longer-term impact, whether it's being hungover on a Saturday morning and sleeping in until 10. Well, then I'm going to be tired on Sunday and I'm likely still going to be recovering that on Monday. And then my work product is worse. And in the beginning years of building a business, those first couple of years are absolutely paramount to where, one day turning into 3 days, turning into a week has a big role. There's 52 weeks in a year, right? If you lose a full week because you had one blowout night or something like that, I'm not saying that you should just be a workaholic and not go out and have a good time, but in taking extreme ownership for your life, you have to really weigh the outcomes of every single choice that you make. And I think a lot of what came with that was also the realization that those closest to you probably won't be able to understand what that's like because they don't have the same vision that you have and they don't believe in exactly what you're setting out to accomplish. And you can't fault anyone for that. But in learning how to communicate and navigate, you can't resent or have bitterment. I don't know if that's a word, but you can't have bitter feelings towards anyone for not seeing it exactly the way that you do. And a lot of times people want to just spend time with you. And that could be something where if you're like, hey, no, I'm staying in on a Friday night because I got a couple things to do for work. And, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and get after it as well, even though it's the weekend. That's hard for some folks. And, that was one of those things early on. Learning to navigate the communication around that was tough. But you keep showing up and you keep putting the reps in, at some point, you'll just be that guy. And if that's the guy you want to be, well, then keep the course, right? Like stay on that path. And eventually, you do enough reps of anything and then it just becomes habit and that's just who you are. And, 2 years into this thing, like I'm entirely different than I was 2 years ago. And the people who love me the most are still here by my side. I'm just a little different in, the way that I carry myself and the way that I operate now. So still the same guy, but I just have different priorities. Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely did. And it's interesting. I think you'll find this cool was for a little while there, we were just growing for the sake of growth. And I didn't really know exactly what it was we were working towards. I remember I had a call and I spoke to a gentleman who's a coach and he was like, well, do you have a mission statement? And I said, yeah, of course. Our mission statement is to provide men with non-toxic, better for balls underwear. And he was like, no, do you have a mission statement? I was like, no, I don't think I do. And I was like, he was like, okay, well, I want you to think about that. So long story short, we flash forward, I don't know, a week, we workshopped it a bunch. And what I actually ended up finding was that I had a disconnect between the fact that one, I didn't have a personal mission statement. So I wasn't really sure exactly what I was working towards. And two, my personal mission statement and the business mission statement should be one and the same because at the end of the day, this is a company that I started. And if I'm on a life mission to accomplish this, this, and this, then the business should be a tool for which I accomplish those things. So I totally squashed that disconnect. And we ended up coming up with this awesome mission statement for Dan, but also for NADS, which is that, I'll speak in the context of Dan right now. It's my mission to improve people's lives by inspiring healthy choices and building connection. And NADS's mission statement is it's our mission to do the same thing, right? So for me, it's my mission to do that. And for NADS, it's our mission to do that. They're one and the same, right? NADS, we have a bunch of people involved and we're all fighting this mission together. It's incredible. I have a team of absolute ass kickers. And I was able to kind of find some sort of peace there because I was having this little rift between, not really having a sense of identity outside of the business. And I was so wrapped up in just the business as itself when I realized that there's like this beautiful overlap between everything that I stand for and what the business is accomplishing. And then I was able to kind of close the gap between Dan and NADS. And ever since I was able to do that, things have gotten a lot better for me from a mental capacity of just having that clear-cut clarity of purpose. And then in turn, things in business and personal have just continued to get better since then. Yeah. Thanks.
To that, to differentiate what is your identity versus what is the. And I think like what we see too is we see a lot of entrepreneurs get so ramped up in the identity of like this is me, without this I'm no one, without this I'm nothing.
Yeah.
And like me as an individual is my value is wrapped up in this. And like if this doesn't work for whatever reason, then I am not worthy.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot too. I had thoughts about that literally today. And as you know, younger guys just starting to play the game, I think that's one thing that luckily is not individualistic to each of us. I think that's something that everybody experiences, which is,
Mm,
in my opinion, something that knocks a little bit of weight off of it for me. Then I'm
yeah,
like, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this. Oh,
yeah,
okay, other people go through this too and have these thoughts. Okay, cool. I can talk to people about solutions here. I can talk to people about, what did they do when they experience these types of feelings? And then that's when I just lean on others, right? And
yeah,
sure, a big piece of my identity is tied to this business right now. And obviously, I'm not attached to one outcome other than some sort of success. But even if we don't do anything past the point of where we are right now, I'll look at this as an ultimate success.
yeah,
We kickstarted a movement within the apparel space, which people are now finally open to, which is that textile choice really does matter. And sure enough, there's a ton of brands that are popping up right now that are fighting the same fight in a different lens, whether it's through underwear or whether it's through shorts or socks or t-shirts. I'm seeing all sorts of social media companies just all over the place now. And since I live in the underwear space, I'm getting targeted by all of them, which is funny. So that's how I can see them. But ultimately, I think a huge piece of this in trying to reshape the way that young men specifically pursue big ambitions and goals is that we can't wrap our identities around only one thing. I am pursuing growing an e-commerce company and shaking up the underwear industry to kind of reprioritize the way we view something often overlooked and its impact on our health. But I'm also trying to, play my guitar a lot more, spend more time with my dog, become a better family man, become a better friend to the people in my circle, build a bigger circle, a more robust set of relationships here in South Florida and just anywhere. Get on more calls with more people, do more cool things, become a better chef, just become a better, well rounded guy. And in doing those things, I'm starting to remember that, after 2 years of putting my head down and really just working and not doing much else, there's a lot of other really, really great stuff. And, every once in a while, you got to step away from, if you're an entrepreneur and you're building something, sometimes you got to step away from some of those things for a little while. I'm coming back into them a lot more lately, and it's really helping me to sort of identify a lot of the areas that are long missed from my identity that I'm finally getting back in touch with. And that's helping me kind of decrease that reliance on NADS as the semblance of my own identity. Right. And some people just keep going and going and going. And like you hear about people who, sell a company for $250 million. And then they're like, then I was miserable and depressed and I didn't know what to do. Well, it's like, okay, well, an idle mind is the devil's playground, right? We're supposed to have purpose. We're supposed to be building, contributing, doing things to where if at some point, we're not going to be the ones at the driver's seat of this business, you bet your ass I'll have teed up another opportunity to jump right into and hit the ground running on. Or I'll go to a cooking school in Italy for a couple of months and come back and be a really good chef or a better chef. Right? Just always trying to do something.
yeah. I think also too, like to mission statement because if it's like if you don't know what to do, like you can always come back to it. And there's like you shake it up, and there's always like a different form it can take.
Yeah.
And like even if it's not NADS, it could be like doing something differently within the same. It still fulfills the same mission.
Right. Yeah. And there's always ways to look at that. And some are then, on the macro and some are a little bit more on the micro. Um, Impact is impact at the end of the day. And if you can have it on 10 million people or 10 people or one person,
Yeah.
if you have the ability to do it, I think you have the responsibility to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good spot to end, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, that was good stuff, man. I don't talk about a lot of that stuff in a lot of the podcasts I do because it's usually more e-com or non-toxic. But like the guy behind the business, like that stuff's so intriguing to me. So I'm pumped we were able to do this. I'm grateful for the opportunity.